How you doing, guys? Today I'm going to just do a few little things to the motor in order to button it up enough where I can actually bolt it down to the frame for good. I just set the valve lash, and according to the Kohler manual, the intake is to be anywhere between 8 and 10 thousandths, and the exhaust is to be anywhere between 17 and 19 thousandths. I set both to intake was intake I set to 9 thousandths, and the exhaust I set to 18 thousandths, so right in the middle. Basically, it's a pretty easy process. The lifter is a ½ inch. The little bolt on the top is 3/8, and you just hold the lifter with the ½ inch wrench, and you just crank the bolt up or down until you feel just a little bit of drag on your 8 and 18 thousandths feeler gauge. One thing to make sure is that the cam is in the neutral position. There you go. So that way both valves are closed and there is no tension or no interference between the valve stem and the lifter. What I'm going to do is I'm going to spray some oil in there and put the bolt back in, put the cover in the breather, and then we're going to move on. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put the new fuel pump block-off plate on. So that'll be all set. I had my cam cover ceramic coated, so it's like silver. It's done, but it's still at my buddy's place, so I got to pick it up on Monday. We're going to high-tack the copper head gasket, and we're going to put that in place. We're also going to put the filler tube, the starter, probably the stator. So we're going to get this engine pretty much all set to go. I'm also hoping to get the flywheel on. All right, let's get to work. Now that I have the valve lash set, I installed the breather stud. Just used 2 nuts, 2 ¼ 20 nuts, just backed them up against each other and then tightened it in. I did squirt oil on the stems, the lifters, and in that area, so that way that's kind of pre-lubricated for that initial startup. Also, I installed the final fuel pump block-off plate. That's a ¼ 20 bolt, so I torqued those into 70 inch-pounds each with a new gasket. So we should be all set there. Now for the breather, I'm using a K-series breather on this Magnum motor because I'm not going to recirculate the crankcase gases into the airbox. So for that, there's a few pieces. This is the gasket that goes to the block. This is actually kind of like the breather housing, you want to call it. It's even marked with the top, so that's the top piece. There's a reed valve. This reed valve, if I can get it, this reed valve goes in there like this. Actually, it goes, if you're reusing a used one, you can see the mark. So this one actually goes in like this. Then there's this kind of like reed valve control plate, I guess you call it. Notice it's not perfectly flat. The angled up tabs, or the angled, it goes in this position. And why is that? That allows that reed valve to tap back and forth. The next thing that we have is we have this rubber control piece, which kind of goes like this, all right, on the stud. And then we have this mesh, that kind of like the oil control mesh, that'll allow the oil to drain back through this little hole. And then we have this gasket that goes on top of all of that, and that seals the actual breather plate that you see on the outside of the motor, which I have right there. So I'm going to assemble all this stuff together, make sure it's good and clean first, assemble everything, and then just tighten it down. I don't really torque this, because if you torque it too much, this will warp, and then forget it. You'll never get it to stop leaking. So we've had a setback with the starter, so to speak. It's not that bad. The starter on the right-hand side is a replacement, or a not even remanufactured. It's an aftermarket starter that I got online. It's made in China, and it shows it. And how does it show it? I removed the retaining bolt that came with the starter that held the housing together. Got that out of the way. It's metric, so it won't work with the ¼ 20 threads of the bearing plate. And this here is an original Kohler mounting bolt, which you're going to reuse. It goes into the housing and then all the way through, but then it's like, okay, why isn't it going through? And I fiddled, and you can see the point of the bolt right there. It won't go. The reason why it won't go through is because they didn't drill the hole big enough for a 1/4-20. So what were you supposed to do? You're supposed to take this thing apart and drill it, or just drill it and let the shavings go into it? It's unbelievable. I was just like, really? And then on top of that, oops, don't want that to fall. There's like a little L bracket that holds this onto the main bracket. This area right here, it's not even threaded. Oops, sorry. It's not even threaded. Because this is supposed to be 1/4-20. There is no threads, so you'd have to tap it. Unbelievable. So then I said, well, I know I have the starter motor from the Magnum 16 when I took it apart. So I took that down into the basement, hooked it up to the battery, and of course, dead as a doornail. Doesn't work. So I was like, really? Again, I went out to the shed. I said I had another kind of older starter I can maybe take a look at, get it to work, so to speak. But when I walked into the shed, I realized that my Magnum 10, which was originally on this tractor, had a new starter on it. It was an aftermarket starter, one of these, but I had no issues with it. So I cannibalized the starter off of the Magnum 10 and have installed it on the 16. I'm going to button this all up, and then I'm going to put the dipstick tube in place, and then I'll be right back. Got the motor all bolted down nice and tight. Cleaned the heads or the deck surface real good. Squirted some oil around the piston and on the rings. That'll eventually just seep through the rings and down into the oil pan, because I'm not going to start it up right away, so to speak. The copper head gasket, it has been sanded down to make sure there's no burrs. I also just hit it with a little bit of high tack sealant on both sides. I'm just letting that tack up. Actually, this stuff right there. That way it'll seal real good and glue down real nice. Got the assembly manual with the bolt pattern. Oops, come on, focus. There it is. The bolt torque pattern and also the torque spec. 10 brand new grade 8 cap bolts, and then I have grade 8 thick 3/8 washers that I'm going to use. So I'm just going to make sure everything's all clean and ready to go, put it all together and torque it down. So after installing the head, you can see I got a little bit carried away. My buddy called and said that my parts were coated and ready to go. So the new exhaust system, all ceramic coated, is installed. Oops, almost tripped and fell. The little Flowmaster muffler is back in place. So that should sound pretty good on a 16. I installed the stator, I installed the flywheel, the cooling fins, and the grass screen. Everything's torqued down and ready to go. I hooked up the 2 wires of the stator. They actually come out right here and go into the box that goes into the rectifier. The kill wire for the coil, or the magneto, is right here. I have to install that, and then I'll cut this wire to fit. The cam cover. I had asked my buddy to ceramic coat that, like the exhaust pipe, just to have like a silver color there. He ended up powder coating it black. Not my first choice, but oh well, it is what it is. But I did pick up the rear rims from the 857, the original rear rims. They're all powder coated and ready to go. I dismounted the Duro tires from those powder coated black John Deere rims I had, so I'll be bringing these tires over to the tire shop to have those mounted on the 857 rims real shortly, maybe next week, and then I can get those on. So a lot of things transpired over the last week and a half. Alright guys, thank you for watching. Please subscribe if you haven't already and you like little tractor or would be interested in little tractor, small engine projects, things to that nature. And as always, give it a thumbs up if you enjoyed this video. I really appreciate all your support. Have a good day.